Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where many of us are trapped in the cycle of dissatisfaction, constantly chasing after external achievements, relationships, and possessions in the hope that they will bring us lasting happiness. Yet we often find ourselves still unfulfilled, restless, and disconnected from the peace that we truly seek. This is because the root of our unhappiness is not found in what we do or have, but in how we think and relate to ourselves and the world around us. Today I want to share with you how to wake up from this cycle of unhappiness and return to the present moment where true peace and joy reside. Unhappiness often arises when we disconnect from the present moment, allowing our minds to drift into the past or future. We become trapped in patterns of regret over things we've done or missed, or we dwell on fears and anxieties about what may or may not happen. This mental escapism leads us further away from the peace and fulfillment that exists in the now. The mind, in its tendency to ruminate, often overlooks the richness of the present moment, where life is actually unfolding. When we focus on what has already happened or worry about what might come, we miss the beauty and potential of what is. The key to waking up from this cycle of unhappiness is bringing our awareness back to the present. By observing the thoughts that arise in our minds without attachment, we begin to recognize that they are just thoughts, not facts. We can shift our focus from the thoughts that distract us to the experience of the present moment itself. In the present, there is no room for regret or worry because both exist only in the mind. True peace arises when we immerse ourselves fully in what is happening right now, whether it's a conversation, a task, or simply sitting in stillness. When we are fully aware of the present, our experience of life becomes more vivid and direct, our senses sharpen, and we begin to notice things we might otherwise overlook: the warmth of the sun, the sound of birds, or the feeling of the ground beneath our feet. The present moment holds endless opportunities for connection, joy, and peace. Yet we must choose to stop and pay attention, to let go of the mental distractions that prevent us from truly living. Unhappiness often stems from the dominance of the ego, the part of our consciousness that identifies with external circumstances, achievements, and roles. The ego thrives on comparison, validation, and a sense of superiority or inferiority, depending on how it perceives itself in relation to others. It is constantly seeking recognition and approval, driven by the need to feel secure and significant. However, this constant striving for external validation leads to an endless cycle of dissatisfaction. When we attach our worth to what we have or what others think of us, we are bound to experience disappointment, as external circumstances are always in flux. To wake up from this cycle of unhappiness, it is essential to recognize that we are not our ego. We are not defined by our achievements, possessions, or the roles we play in society. The true essence of who we are exists beyond these surface-level identities. When we begin to disidentify from the ego, we can free ourselves from the need to prove anything to anyone, including ourselves. This disidentification allows us to live with greater freedom, as we no longer feel compelled to compare ourselves to others or seek external validation. The ego also creates separation. Fostering a sense of us versus them, it encourages us to view others as competitors or threats rather than fellow human beings sharing the same experience of life. When we recognize the limitations of the ego, we can transcend this sense of division and experience a deeper connection to others. By embracing our true essence and seeing ourselves as part of the larger whole, we awaken to the peace that comes from within, no longer needing external validation to feel complete. Unhappiness often arises from our resistance to what is. We spend a great deal of energy fighting against the present moment, wishing that things were different, that life would unfold according to our desires. Whether it's a difficult situation, a challenging person, or an unfavorable circumstance, our minds tend to resist reality. This resistance is rooted in the belief that we know better than life itself, that we have a clear idea of how things should be. However, this creates an ongoing battle between what is and what we think should be, which only intensifies our suffering. The key to breaking free from this cycle of unhappiness is learning to accept what is. Acceptance doesn't mean resignation or passive surrender, but rather an openness to reality as it is, without judgment or resistance. When we accept the present moment, we stop fighting against it, we stop wishing for it to be different. This doesn't mean we can't take action to improve our situation, but it allows us to approach life with a sense of peace and clarity, rather than frustration or bitterness. Acceptance allows us to see life as it truly is, not as an obstacle to be overcome, but as a series of experiences that we can navigate with greater ease and understanding. By letting go of our resistance, we open ourselves to the flow of life. We stop living in the future, where we imagine how things could be, or in the past, where we mourn how things used to be. Instead, we root ourselves in the now, where peace and fulfillment are always available. When we accept what is, we free ourselves from unnecessary pain, making space for joy and serenity to arise naturally. One of the most common sources of unhappiness is our attachment to expectations. We have an innate desire to control life, to impose our will upon the unfolding of events and circumstances. We set expectations about how things should be, how our careers should progress, how our relationships should evolve, or how we should feel at any given moment. When life does not meet these expectations, we experience disappointment, frustration, and a sense of failure. Expectations create a rigid framework through which we view the world, and when reality does not align with this framework, we feel a deep sense of discontent. The key to breaking free from this cycle is to let go of our attachment to specific outcomes. This does not mean that we stop having goals, desires, or ambitions. It simply means that we release the need to control how these things come to fruition. When we are overly attached to a particular result, we narrow our vision and limit ourselves. We forget that life is dynamic, unpredictable, and constantly changing. By letting go of rigid expectations, we allow ourselves to flow with life as it unfolds, without the pressure of needing everything to fit into a preconceived plan. When we stop attaching our happiness to specific outcomes, we open ourselves to a broader range of experiences. We become more receptive to unexpected opportunities and blessings that we may have overlooked when we were fixated on a particular outcome. Life, when approached with openness and flexibility, becomes a series of unfolding possibilities, each moment offering something valuable, even if it doesn't match our original expectations. The practice of letting go of expectations frees us from the tyranny of disappointment and allows us to embrace the present as it is, with all its imperfections and uncertainties. Unhappiness often arises when we fail to embrace the impermanence of life. Everything in our existence, our relationships, our circumstances, even our emotions is transient. Yet we resist change, clinging to moments, people, and things as though they will last forever. This attachment to permanence creates a deep sense of insecurity. We fear loss, we resist change, and in doing so we become trapped in a cycle of suffering. When we try to hold on to the unchangeable, we are essentially fighting against the natural flow of life. The truth is that change is inevitable, and it is inescapable. Life is a constant process of birth, growth, decay, and renewal. Every experience, every feeling is temporary. The difficulty arises when we refuse to let go and allow things to pass. Instead of resisting change, we must learn to embrace it. By accepting the impermanence of life, We free ourselves from the fear of loss and the pain of clinging to what cannot remain the same. When we begin to let go of the need for permanence, we can experience life more fully. Each moment becomes more precious because we understand that it won't last forever. We begin to see beauty in the fleeting nature of our experiences, whether it's the fleeting joy of a moment, the passing of a season, or the impermanent nature of our emotions. Rather than clinging to things as a way of securing our happiness, we allow ourselves to experience life with greater openness and appreciation, knowing that it is the very transience that gives life its richness and depth. By letting go of the attachment to permanence, we free ourselves from suffering and open ourselves to the fullness of the present moment. A major contributor to unhappiness is our tendency to live in our thoughts rather than fully experiencing the world around us. The mind constantly churns out narrative stories about who we are, who we should be, and what is wrong with our lives. These thoughts can become so overwhelming that they shape our entire reality, blurring our perception of the present moment. Instead of being fully engaged with life, we become lost in our internal dialogue, trapped in the past or future, and disconnected from the richness of the now. The key to breaking free from this cycle is learning to observe our thoughts without becoming identified with them. We are not our thoughts, yet we often believe that we are. When we identify with our thoughts, we give them power over us. We create stories about ourselves, our circumstances, and the world, often focusing on negativity, fear, and doubt. These stories, however, are not the truth of who we are, they are simply mental constructs. To wake up from this state of unconsciousness, we must cultivate a sense of awareness and mindfulness. By observing our thoughts without judgment or attachment, we begin to see them for what they truly are, just thoughts, fleeting and transient. We can step back from the mental noise and experience the present moment with clarity. When we are no longer lost in our thoughts, we become more aware of the sights, sounds, and sensations around us. We can experience the world as it truly is, without the distortion of the mind's endless chatter. Living in the present, free from the constraints of our mental stories, allows us to experience a deeper sense of peace and contentment. The present moment is always available to us, yet we must choose to be fully present, letting go of the mind's distractions and embracing the fullness of life as it is.